Europe is facing its worst crisis since the Treaty of Rome in 1957, when the whole idea of a united Europe was born. What's going to happen to the euro? Does anyone still have a vision of Europe in the future? And who's in charge? We're live here at the European Commission for this special Italk programme, a joint production between Euronews and YouTube Worldview. You've been sending in your video and written questions for the President of the European Commission, José Manuel Barroso. Mr. Barroso, thank you very much for being with us. On YouTube Worldview, we've already had President Obama, we've had Prime Ministers Netanyahu and Cameron. We're delighted to have you. The principle is very simple. Quick questions, quick answers. We've received questions from all around the world, a lot from Europe, obviously. First, a question perhaps on what's happened overnight. Steve Jobs.
It's a great loss. I think if someone gave a great contribution to the way we are living today, it was Steve Jobs. The way we interact, the fact that now technology is available to the common people, information disseminated.
I use it yourself?
Yes, I use it a lot. And I think the world has changed a lot because of his creativity and his innovation. So I want to pay tribute to his life and to his legacy.
OK, right. So the questions are from everybody who's been sending them in on YouTube. Let's go to a first video question from Belgium.
Mr. Barroso, do you feel responsible in any way for the economic mess that we're seeing in the European Union at the moment?
Direct questions. Do you feel responsible for this in any way?
I did not create it, but of course I feel responsible the way we are dealing with it, and we are making all our efforts.
You mean dealing with it wrongly, or what?
We are doing everything to solve it, but it's not easy between 17 countries in the euro area, between 27 countries in the European Union. I think we are making some progress, but frankly, I would like to have progress faster, because governments and parliaments are much slower than markets.
Let's have another written question about the crisis in Europe, which has been voted on. You've been voting on these questions on YouTube Worldview, and this is one of the most popular ones. Here's the question up here. It's how is it possible to boost the Greek economy if no one can buy anything anymore? Everybody's talking, Mr. Barroso, about a double-dip recession that seems to be we're heading for it. Nobody's buying things. How can we boost the economy, not only in Greece but elsewhere?
One country, like one family or one company, cannot live a long time above its means. And Greece was doing precisely that. So it is unavoidable now to have fiscal consolidation, to reduce the level of expenditure. This is unavoidable, and this is the consequence of wrong policies. At the same time, we are trying to compensate that through some measures to enhance growth. That's why I created a task force precisely to speed up, to front-load the structural funds so that we can help some investment in Greece. But let's be frank. Greece and other countries that are living above their means have now to make some painful adjustments, and it's unavoidable.
But there's some indecision at the moment about whether Greece will get the next tranche of 8 billion euros. We can't even decide if they're going to get it in 2 weeks.
Because it's a condition for that tranche to be disbursed that they comply with all the commitments they took. That's why we have the so-called Troika now in Athens, the European Commission, with the IMF, with the European Central Bank, making an assessment of the situation.
OK, let's go to another written question which was sent in on YouTube Worldview. What about the sanctions against countries that have been spending too much for half a century? And over the last few years, has everybody been spending a lot saying, oh, well, it's OK, Germany will bail us out?
Look, we have just now adopted, following the proposals of the Commission, a reinforced Stability and Growth Pact. That means precisely more discipline, more integration in the way we manage our national budgets to avoid overspending, to avoid high levels of debt or very high deficits.
Can I just ask you what integration exactly means? Does that mean fiscal integration? What does that mean?
It means that there will be powers given to the European Commission by the member states to launch this investigation of excessive deficits and in due course to apply sanctions. And this is very important precisely because we cannot have a common currency without some kind of common discipline and to some level of integration the way we take decisions.
So these are the stress tests, are they?
No, this is not exactly stress test. This is about the way we manage collectively different national budgets. If you want to have a common currency, we need to have some kind of integration and common discipline for that. And now we have agreed, all the member states have agreed to reinforce those mechanisms.
Okay, another question on the theme of the economic crisis. This is another written question that was sent into YouTube Worldview. Let's have a look. Yeah, why was nothing done sooner about state debt? We knew this was coming. Why was the European Commission not heard more strongly, warning people this was about to come?
Look, in fact, we have done it. Probably not so vigorously as we should, but in fact, the European Commission has always warned about the high levels of debt in our member states. Unfortunately, at that time, we had not all the instruments we are going to have now. And now the member states are ready to accept more
Which instruments are these?
For instance, I've asked in the first mandate of my commission, I've asked to have the possibility of sending the Eurostat, our statistic office, to look in the national accounts. And the member states did not give us that right. Now they have accepted, because what happened is that sometimes the governments, they manipulate their accounts and they don't give the exact data. And now, because of the real mess where we are, there is a goodwill to understand that we need to manage this collectively.
What you're actually saying is that this is what the French call a crise salutaire, a salutary crisis.
Yes.
This is actually giving the European Commission more power to control the European economy.
Yes, not more power for us, but more power for the Union as a whole. And in fact, if you look at the history of the European integration, it is precisely when there is crisis that we make progress. So I think that's what's going to happen this time. We will get out of this crisis stronger, because now governments and also citizens are learning the hard way the costs of not having sufficiently integrated policies in some areas.
There was another question which was a lot of people asked on YouTube, was what is the integration between the states and the European Union? How much can you work together to prevent this double-dip recession?
We need it. In the globalized world, it's obvious that if Europe wants to count, if we want to defend the citizens' interests of Europe, if we want to discuss with our American friends or with China or Russia or others, we need a more integrated Europe. We keep our different countries, of course, the 27 countries, the national identity. We are not replacing our countries by a new country, but we should have a stronger European Union where the member states put together some competence so that we can manage collectively some matters of common interest, like the common currency.
Okay, Mr. Barroso, this was the most voted for question on YouTube Worldview. Let's have a look at it. Could you please explain in what way and how much money has been spent by the EU countries to bail out banks in the 2008 financial crisis? How much are we still spending now?
Look, since 2008 in Europe, at least 500 billion euros directly to support the banks, which was, of course, a way also to support the savings of people in those banks and investors. But if you count with the guarantees, it is more than 1 trillion euros. And if you add all the measures taken to help the real economy, it's more than 4 trillion euros. So it's really a huge amount of money.
So this money is coming from our pockets, basically.
From the taxpayers, of course. That's one of the reasons why I think it's only fair to ask now the financial sector to give a contribution back to society.
So this is your Tobin tax, but
yes.
It's been criticised a lot, especially in Sweden, where they did it, and everybody left the country. Nobody wanted to invest in Sweden anymore because of the financial tax. Are you not worried about that?
That's the reason to have it a global tax. That's why in the G20 we are going to push for having a global tax. But if there is not an agreement to have it immediately at the global level, at least someone has to start, and why not to start it here in Europe?
Okay, we have another video question which was posted on YouTube for Mr. Barroso. It comes from Spain.
Quería preguntarle que viendo estos días cómo algunos responsables de entidades financieras, sobre todo cajas de ahorros en el caso español, viendo cómo estos responsables de estas entidades han hundido estas cajas de ahorro y que en muchos casos ha sido en beneficio propio. Yo quería preguntarle qué piensa hacer la Comisión Europea, si en este sentido piensa dar alguna directriz o piensa obligar a los Estados miembros de la Unión a tomar medidas contra estos responsables, medidas penales pero también económicas.
I don't know if you saw these pictures in New York even last night. People are very furious. They feel that the banks have been getting rich. People are more and more furious. Can the European Commission, the European Union, take any steps to punish these people?
Yes. In fact, so far this is national responsibility. This is the legislation of civic responsibility, civilian or criminal responsibility. But now we are going to come with a proposal for the kind of responsibility of leaders in the financial institutions, personal responsibility for wrongdoing.
So what would they do? Go to prison, or they have to pay fines?
We are going to pay to criminalize. To propose the criminalization of some acts. We already adopted, the Commission, some proposals for the remuneration of bankers. This is already done, our proposal. But now we are thinking about putting some kind of personal responsibility in the leaders of financial institutions for some wrongdoing that they may cause to the society.
OK, let's have another written question here live in Brussels for Mr. Barroso. So why is Europe not seriously engaged in completely banning toxic bank assets and creating its own rating agency? Perhaps that would give us a better rating. I don't know if we had a European rating agency. And what about Dexia? What about these issues?
Look, regarding the rating agency, European one, we believe it's not appropriate to have a public European rating agency because some conflicts of interest could come that could undermine the credibility of such rating agencies. But in fact, we are now putting some legislation to put the decisions of investors and the governments less dependent on 3 or 4 rating agencies, because we believe sometimes this cannot be fair, and also to improve the way this kind of data is used in the political decision making or also in investors' decision makers. I think it is important that. Regarding the first question about toxic, we are doing that precisely. We are now proposing to the member states to have a coordinated action to recapitalize banks and so to get rid of toxic assets that they may have.
Where do you see the euro in 10 years' time? That's a question a lot of people ask in one sentence. What's going to happen to the euro?
Stronger, of course. So far, many members want to join the euro. No one wants to quit the euro.
OK, well, let's change theme now. We have various themes that you've been asking questions on YouTube Worldview. It's 10:12 here in Brussels. Let's change the theme to social questions, and we have a question from a Danish girl. Let's have a look.
Hi, I'm Signe from Denmark. I would like to ask you a question. What is Europe doing for me to get a better job opportunities?
Straight to the point, what are you doing?
Very nice name, Signe. We are doing a lot, complementing, of course, the efforts of our member states. We create an agenda for innovation. We are trying to deepen the single market because the reality is that we have a single market for goods, 500 million people in Europe, but there are still a lot of barriers in terms of services, for instance, and so there is a potential for growth and creating more jobs if we really eliminate many of the barriers.
Yes, but you've seen the people on Syntagma Square. They're not convinced that you're helping them to find jobs.
Of course not, I understand, but it was not the fault of Europe, to be honest. It was the fault of irresponsible national budgetary policies. And in fact, the money that Europe has put in Greece for the structural funds was huge, but only 24% of that money was really invested. And one of the things we are doing now is to try to help the member states to invest in a way to reinforce their competitiveness. And in fact, some of those countries, they did not make the most of this money that was given to them by the European taxpayer.
OK, another question which interests a lot of people, again, a question a lot of people voted for on YouTube. Let's have a look. The point of law in the EU is that people should retire later than they do at the moment. but won't they occupy jobs that would otherwise become available to young people? It's an impossible equation. We don't have enough jobs.
Yes, but Europe needs to work more. If we want to remain competitive globally, we cannot do it by working less. So we need to have more input from labor. That's why we need to increase our employment rate. Our goal is 75%, because if you compare to China with other parts of the world, in fact, we are losing that battle. At the same time, of course, we should have active programs for employment of young people. The youth unemployment is probably the most dramatic situation we have now. In Europe, 1 out of 5 young people does not find a job.
And what about retirement? We have different retirement ages. People in France retire at 62. In Britain, it's 67.
There is not a single, let's say, limit or target, but we are asking member states to make their reforms in a way that their social security systems are sustainable. Because if people now with the longer lives, and that's good that now people live longer in Europe, the life expectancy is going much higher. It's only natural that so that we can finance these, let's say, retirement pensions, we have also longer periods of work. But it's a national responsibility. But generally speaking, all member states are taking measures in what I believe is the right direction.
Let's have another video question that was posted on YouTube for Mr. Barroso.
Despite commitments made by the European Union institutions and member states to combat violence against women, little progress has been made. Any attempt to resuscitate an ailing economy and society cannot ignore the issue of violence against women. So how do you propose to address this human rights crisis as you call for a stronger Europe?
Vast and serious theme. What would you say?
It's a very serious and dramatic issue, the issue of violence against women. What we are doing, first of all, we have a European Charter of Fundamental Rights, and the European Union is very strong in defending all those matters and rights, and against fighting all kinds of discrimination, including discrimination against women. I think globally we are having a very good role there. Having said that, we are establishing some networks and communication between the national authorities to avoid this crime to go on.
OK, we'll have just one more question about social issues. Let's have a look. Are there any plans for harmonising European policy on social subjects like gay marriage, abortion and euthanasia? For example, gay marriage. Gay people can get married in your country, in Portugal. Mm-hmm. In France, where I live, they can't.
Yes.
Why? We're all European citizens.
Yes, but the member states consider, and we respect that is a competence of national legislation. So we are going to keep it, because there are different national sensitivities on that matter. At the same time, we have the European Charter of Fundamental Rights. We believe that there are some rights that have to be protected all over Europe, but these specific issues of gay marriage, of abortion, of euthanasia are a matter of national responsibility.
But do you think that will change ever? You seem to want it to.
Look, the United States, they are a country, and in fact they have different legislations in the different states. Some accept gay rights, others don't accept. So in Europe we cannot have also, let's be honest, a complete uniformity in all aspects of the citizens' lives. As you say, in Europe, thanks God, now we can travel to all countries in Europe without restrictions. People can choose where they live, but we cannot have exactly the same model all over Europe for some of these more sensitive issues. OK, the President of the European Commission, José Manuel Barroso, asking your questions that you asked on YouTube Worldview. Let's change theme now. A lot of questions about the vision of Europe and the way Europe works. Let's start with a first video question.
If you were asked to come to the United Kingdom and argue the reasons for Britain staying in the EU, what arguments would you use, and what would you do to convince Britain that the EU was the better place to be than outside? Harry Hayfield, Cardigan County, Wales. A genuine Welshman here. My country is the most Europhobic country. They're talking about a referendum again of coming out. How can you convince them to stay in? I mean, look at what's happening. Look, first of all, it's a choice of the British people. I don't pretend to give lessons to the British people. If they want to be... But you can convince them with arguments that they should stay. They will be happy because to have Britain, it's a very important country, and I will
would be happy to have Britain at the center of the Union. But if the British don't want to be, no one forces Britain to be. This is very important because we are a union of countries that are democratic and free. And we are not at all imposing anything on people against their will. Having said this, what are the benefits for the United Kingdom? Look, United Kingdom can count much more in the world with Britain. With Britain, of course, resources, but also with the European Union. Because today, in the globalized world, I mean, if you use the huge market, the biggest market in the world in terms of value is the European Union market. The biggest economy together, the biggest donor of development aid. Also, the United Kingdom benefits a lot from the internal market of 500 million people. Britain is a trading nation. Britain can also push their concerns about openness through the European Union. So I believe it's in the interest of Britain people, but of course it's up to the British people to decide.
A similar theme on another written question that was sent. Let's have a look at that. Despite the Lisbon reforms, Euroscepticism is at a record level, and the EU fails to communicate in a practical way with EU citizens. When and how will we see a meaningful change? In 1 minute, President of the European Commission. Sell us Europe.
Today I'm trying to do that precisely, to communicate through you.
This is the first too, isn't it? You haven't done this exercise
this kind
before.
of exercise is the first, but I've been doing other similars, and every time I have the opportunity to go to Europe and to communicate to people, I do it. But frankly, once again, it's not up only to the European Commission. Europe is not just Brussels. Europe is not just the Commission. Europe is also what we can do at national level. So I ask all the leaders at national level to assume their responsibilities. When they have a problem, not to say it's the fault of Brussels. And when they have something good, to say that it's merit.
They're always going to say that because it's such an easy excuse.
Yes, but that's not fair.
Sometimes it is the fault of Brussels.
Sometimes it is, but sometimes it is not. And so what I don't think is fair is that when things go wrong, people put the blame on Brussels. When things go well, they say that's their merit. We have to communicate about Europe, not only in Brussels, but in Paris, in Berlin, in London, in Lisbon, in Athens. We have to make the case for Europe because this is the most beautiful project we have built in history. To put so many countries, democratic countries, living together, sharing their competences.
Okay, another question that YouTubers asked. Why don't the people of Europe get to vote on the position of the Commission President? It's not very democratic, is it? Who elected you?
The Parliament, European Parliament elected me. I was elected in my country as Prime Minister, so I was...
You must feel there's a difference, though, because the people elected you as Prime Minister, and it was the Parliament.
Yes, because we are 27 different countries, 27 democracies, and so we have a complex issue of electing a President of the Commission. It is a choice of the governments, and afterwards it is or not elected by the Parliament. And I was very proud to get that election twice. Having said this, in the future, we cannot exclude that possibility of having indeed a real election. I will be delighted if that happens one day.
OK, we have one of your compatriots, Mr. Barroso, who's asking the next written question. Why don't we vote for a new constitution or have a referendum to see whether European citizens want a federal Europe or not? You get the impression that a lot of politicians are afraid of having referendums about Europe. The Conservatives in Britain wanted it before, but now they're in power, they don't want to do it.
Yes, but
because everybody would say no.
It's not only a political question, it's also a legal question. In some countries, referendums are not allowed, namely in matters of international responsibility. So it's an interesting idea, because I am for the legitimation by the people, but in fact we are, and this is important to understand, we are a union of countries that have different constitutional rules as well. So, but I think we have to do that at national level to see what we can do to explain and increase, of course, the legitimacy of the European Union.
OK, it's 10:24 practically here live in Brussels. The last theme is theme of expansion, and we go to a question from France.
Good day, Mr. José Manuel Barroso. Turkey involved itself in protecting Europe from communist expansion by entering NATO in 1952. Don't you think that it is the duty for Europe to accept such a strong nation which has been waiting for nearly 50 years in the European Union? Thank you.
Just a brief comment. Does Turkey still want to be part of the European Union?
I think so. I met recently the President and the Prime Minister of Turkey, and both told me they wish to become members. And there is a process of negotiations going on. I tell you, it's a difficult and complex process. Also in Europe, there are people who support Turkey becoming a member, others who are very much against. That's the reality. And so this creates also this kind of frustration that we have seen in this viewer that we have just now mentioned. The Commission remains committed to fair negotiations with Turkey. They have to meet some conditions, and we will engage on that process very loyally with our Turkish partners.
Okay, another question that was posted on YouTube Worldview on this same theme, a written question. Why is the EU focused on expanding its borders when actual EU members are facing so many economical problems? It's a very obvious question. We can't even deal with ourselves, let alone inviting new ones to the party.
This is almost the other side, because the other citizens believe exactly that we should not enlarge. I think the enlargement has been one of the greatest achievements of the European Union. The European Union started with 6, afterwards 9, 10, 12, now 27 countries. We have a continental-wide union. And this is why I cannot be pessimistic about Europe. When you think sometimes ago...
Even now?
No, Europe was divided. Half of Europe was under dictatorship. Even my country, Portugal, but also Spain or Greece some times ago were not free countries. And the Central Eastern European countries that now are part, look at Poland, how dynamic, how pro-European they are. So it's a great progress. Now, of course, we have problems. I think we should do both at the same time. We should solve our problems at the same time, keep our doors open, because Europe has a great transformational power. We are also helping those societies close to us to modernize, to respect democracy, and to make more free societies.
Mr. Barroso, we had quite a few questions on YouTube about foreign policy. Quick answers, I'm afraid, because we're running out of time. Let's have one question about foreign policy. Could you explain to the Tunisian people why the European intervention in Tunisia during the youth revolution was so passive, while it's so heavy in Syria and Libya? That's under the responsibility of the person who sent that, the Tunisian Eagle they signed. What would you react?
I will want to answer to the Tunisian Eagle that I don't agree with the Eagle, because in fact we have been supporting from the very first moment this transition. I was personally in Tunis. Cassie Ashton has been, our High Representative has been there. So far, the transition in Tunisia has been peaceful, and that's great. So it was not necessary to use the, let's say, other kind of means used in Libya. But I think it is fair to say that the European Union was the first to support the aspirations of freedom of the Tunisian people.
OK, we have a specific question, obviously, for you from a Portuguese viewer. Let's have a look at that. As a Portuguese leader, you were a firm supporter of Timor independence. As a European leader, couldn't you be a firm supporter of Palestine independence? I'm going to press you for a quick, basic answer.
I am a supporter of Palestinian independence. I believe the Palestinian people has the right to live in a state of their own. And in fact, the European Union is by far the biggest contributor to that. We are helping them financially to build their own administration and become a viable state. At the same time, let's be honest, there will be not a viable Palestinian state without peace with Israel. So I am for a Palestinian state living in peace with the state of Israel. The Jewish people also deserve the right to live in peace with their neighbors.
OK, a final question. I said we had questions from around the world. We have a question, I think, from somebody from the USA, but it sums up things nicely. Let's have a video question to round off this programme.
Mr. Barroso, in your State of the Union address, in response to the EU's financial crisis, you proposed deeper economic integration, firepower and firewalls for the euro, and treaty changes, which will dramatically change the EU. When you leave office in 2014 and hand the reins to the new Commission President, how will the EU differ from where it stands today?
And I'm going to ask you to resume that in 10 seconds, if you can, Mr. Barroso.
Oh, my God. But I'm sure it will be stronger. And in fact, if you look at the evolution, in the middle of the crisis, we have created a stronger union. Just now, We have stronger rules for the Stability and Growth Pact. We have now European authorities for the banking and financial sector. So this is the interesting thing with Europe. Sometimes we need a crisis to make a real progress. So Europe will be stronger in 2014 than it was before. I assume that responsibility.
Obrigado. Thank you very much indeed, José Manuel Barroso. You've been watching a special Italk produced by Euronews and YouTube Worldview, live here from the European Commission in Brussels. If you want to listen again to some of the President's replies, you can see the programme on both our websites. Thanks for your questions and see you next time on Euronews. Goodbye from Brussels.